Hey, I'm so excited you found this video. We're going to tell you the things you need to know before you go or even plan to go to Brooks Lodge or Falls or Campground. Brooks Falls is located in the south corner of Alaska and Katmai National Park.
Hey, I just got back from Brooks Lodge. We stayed up there to see the bears, and it was an incredible trip. But there were some things that I think people should know before you go. I mean, it's really important. The first things you need to know about are when are the bears there. So the bears start arriving in June near the end of the month. So the campground opens up in May, the lodge opens up June 1st, but not really toward the end of June. Is there any reason to be there? Because that's when the bears start arriving, because in July is the start of the salmon run. That's what the bears are there for. So about mid-July is peak. This means that the salmon are jumping like popcorn. I mean, pop, 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 pop. There are so many bears. There could be 25 bears at the fall at one time. There are goods and bads that happen along with that, so that if that's the best time to be there, that's when everybody wants to be there. So there can be long lines at the main platform. In order to be there, you may have to be on a list and wait 30 minutes, an hour and a half, 2 hours even sometimes to be able to see the bears, and then you can only stay for an hour at a time, so that's a downside. Now after mid-July, the number of jumping fish decrease. So we were watching the webcam, and really there were fish jumping all the way through. We originally got on the website. We were there on the website, so we did not get to stay at the lodge. Now the lodge takes a lot of planning to stay at the lodge, because really you need 2 years notice to be able to stay at the lodge. The reservations for the lodge open up. It's a lottery, so just to get into the lodge, you have to be lucky. So the lottery starts December 1st, 2 years before you want to go. So say 2023 in December, you want to go, you're making reservations for 2025. So we missed that. So the same year, if you want to go to Brooks Falls and stay overnight, starting this January 5th, of the same year is when the reservations come open, at least right now, to be able to go for the same year. That's what we did. So we got on, fingers poised. I left work to be able to be there on time with my fingers poised, my boyfriend too, to be able to get reservations. By the time we figured out what the heck was going on with that website, there was nothing left. So you might want to practice using that website and making reservations for things you really don't want to go to, so you can figure out how that thing works, because it's a little bit tricky. The only thing that was available by the time that we got through and figured it all out for 3 nights in a row, which is what we want, was September 18th, which was magically when nobody was taking any reservations. We thought that was odd, and we took it. So what you need to know is there are fish jumping in September. But the numbers of fish jumping in September are, a fish jumping in a way that could actually be caught by a bear once every 15 minutes or so. I mean, there are fish jumping, but not in places where bears are on the lip of the falls, which is the shot you want. I mean, there are fish being caught about every 5 minutes, but not on the lip. And instead of 25 bears there at the falls, there are 1 to 8 bears on the falls. So it's a really different experience if you go. Now, one of the things we found out when we were, 2 weeks before our trip, September 18th, to go, is I started checking into, how's this going to work? Because we'd already found out that the lodge is only open from June 1st to September 18th. I found this out about 2 weeks before our trip. We already knew that, so first thing you need to know is that the flights to get to Brooks Lodge, they're only running June 1st to September 18th. So if you want to go up there after those dates or before those dates, it's more likely that you're going to have to charter your own flight. Yeah, that's what I said. You have to charter your own flight. It's about $1,000 to charter your own flight to get out there. Now, somebody else might add in with you, maybe, but in order to guarantee you're going to get there, you got to charter your own flight. That's a round trip $1,000, which we were able to suck it up. But as I started checking out the information 2 weeks before our trip, we found out little details like when the lodge closed, that free meal, well, not free meal, that meal that was going to be cooked for you is no longer available. We were ready to suck that up. But, little detail, the electricity that runs the lodge is not running anymore. So there's no electricity to give you potable water. Right. So without potable water, we'd have to take our own water or filtration system. That's a problem. And without the electricity to run the water, there's not electricity to run the electrical fence that goes around the campground. So the campground has this electric fence around, so you have to make sure that you open and then close the gate back. And if anybody leaves it open, you're supposed to close it anyway. So now there's no real good barrier between you and the bears other than their memory that that fence was electric. So that's a problem too. So there's no meals at the lodge. There's no potable water. Well, I called about the rangers, and you see there's a problem. The rangers are not staffing there anymore. So if there's a problem with the bears, there's no ranger to help take care of them. So that's a problem too. And then we were checking about cell phone coverage. So what if we had a problem? There ain't no cell phone coverage up there and no internet coverage up there. So I called my flight people that we set up our flight with, and I said, what happens if we have a problem and we need to pick you up early, or you have a problem and you can't fly and come and get us? He said, the flight will come when it's supposed to come and it won't come any earlier. And if it's delayed, we expect you to sit and wait for us until we can come. I said, okay. So we decided, oh no, we can't do this flight. We can't go at the end of September. So the first thing you want to know is you want to go when the lodge is open. What we ended up doing, and what you can do too, and this is the important hack we've gotten so far, and we're just now getting to a really important hack, is people have to plan this trip so far in advance that they cancel at the last minute. So 2 weeks before our trip, we were able to just put together with cancellations on the website by checking it obsessively, like multiple times a day. We were able to get 3 nights together earlier in September when the lodge was open. So that worked out perfectly. So the things you need to know is the lodge is open June 1st to September 18th. In order to get into the lodge at $850 a night, you need to be able to book that 2 years in advance. And if you want to camp, you need to book that January 5th when those dates come open. You need to be poised. If you can't get sites, then start looking for cancellations because they're going to come open. But you need to be able to plan your trip with short notice. So the other things I want you to know is that it's important to get your flights with Katmai Air. So there are 2 ways to get to Brooks Camp. You can fly. You can do a direct flight from Anchorage. It's about $1,350 to be able to fly directly from Anchorage to Brooks Camp. Those book up pretty quickly, and those people are going for day trips. Or you can fly and go to King Salmon and then go to Brooks Camp. That's what we ended up doing. And I recommend if you go to King Salmon that you go and spend the night there so you can take the first flight in the morning and be able to go then on into Brooks Camp. I recommend going with Katmai Air because Katmai Air is associated with the people who run Brooks Lodge. So they are invested to get their people that are paying $850 a night to their lodge. So they're not going to cancel willy-nilly. So I recommend booking with Katmai Air to be able to get there because they're less likely to cancel. The other way you can get there is by water taxi. So the flight from Anchorage to King Salmon is, and that's, you can't, the number one you need to know is you can't drive to King Salmon and you can't drive to Brooks Camp. There are no roads to get there, so you have to fly. So the flight from Anchorage to King Salmon is an hour to hour and 20 minutes. It's offered by Raven Air or Alaska Airlines or Katmai Air. So you want to make sure that you fly to King Salmon and again stay overnight in King Salmon. We stayed at the Antler Inn. Now I really recommend the Antler Inn because once you get to King Salmon, there's only a local carrier for telephone coverage. So you're unlikely once you get there to have cell phone coverage, to be able to call any place to come and pick you up. So you want to be able to stay at some place nearby where the flight comes in at King Salmon. We stayed at the Antler Inn, which was kind of hard to find, but really is just down the road from the airport terminal at King Salmon. So the things you want to know about the flight from Anchorage to King Salmon. There's a weight limit of 60 pounds, and it's $1.75 for every pound that you are over on the flight going to King Salmon. Now, the other thing you want to know is that when you fly from King Salmon to Brooks Lodge, the weight limit is 50 pounds, but there's only a 35-cent charge for every pound overage. You want to book both of those flights together, and that's going to run you about $1,000. You need to know that the flight from King Salmon to Brooks is a small float plane, and you have no storage space in the overhead bin. They're going to weigh you when you get there. They're going to weigh you, and they're going to weigh your gear. And it is a problem if the plane is overweight. So what may happen is that if you have too much weight, your luggage will be bumped to another flight later. That they might do one flight where they have only luggage and they take that. So you just need to know that if you don't keep your weight of your gear and you to the right weight, they might bump your gear. Our gear almost got bumped. And you need to know that when you're flying with Katmai Air, that you don't go through a security check. They don't check to see if you have luggage, liquid. They just want to make sure what your weight is. And if you can leave gear that you don't need, say you go to Alaska and there's some stuff that you don't need to take Brooks Camp, you can always leave that at Katmai Air. You don't have to take that all the way through, but you just need to know that you want to make sure that your flights bring you back by the Katmai Air office so that you can pick that up. One of the important things that I think that when you're flying on the float plane, you want to try to be one of the first or the second groups going onto the float plane because someone gets to sit up front with the pilot. Now, on the way there, the first person on the plane, me, got to sit up front with the pilot. On my way back, the first group, which was Guy and I, got sent to the back. The second person on the plane, the second group of people, the first in that group got to be sit up front with the pilot. So if you want to sit up the pilot, which was amazing, you want to make sure that you're one of the first or the second groups on the plane. Now there is another way to get to Katmai Brooks Camp. The other way is by water taxi. The good thing about the water taxi is it goes every 2 hours from King Salmon up to Brooks Lodge. It goes starting at 6 a.m. in the morning. So if you want to get there early, they start early. They go every 2 hours starting at 6 a.m. and they go all the way up to 6 p.m. It takes them about 45 minutes, and there's no luggage limit if you go by water taxi, which sounds great. The only problem is that if the weather is bad, the first thing that cancels out is the water taxi. And one of the problems is if there's a cancellations due to weather from on your water taxi, they don't refund your money. So you want to make sure that you have travel insurance so that you don't end up owing all the money for that water taxi. And we did find that when we were there that the water taxis stopped running abruptly. So if you've been planning this trip for a really long time and then you get up there and they've canceled your water taxi trip, you're in trouble about how to get up there. So I think the more reliable way to get to Brooks Camp is to go by Katmai Air, because again, they're invested in getting you there because people are paying $850 a night to stay in their lodge, so they want to make those flights run. The other thing that you need to know is there's no cell phone service when you're up at Brooks Lodge. There's no internet service either, so you want to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row and that you're good before you get there because there's not going to be any cell phone coverage. Let's talk about Brooks Lodge, the lodging itself. It's $850 a night for a hut. That means you have 4 beds in that, 2 bunk beds on either side of the room. And in that room, it's a small room, you have a toilet and a shower and a place to put your gear. But for 4 people, this is a tight space that you kind of have to juggle around each other to make sure that you have room to move, because it is a tight space. So this is not a luxury place for $850 a night. With the 6% tax, that's $901. So if you make plans to go there, if money is tight, then you might want to look around for friends to be able to fill up all 4 of those bunks. If you, there are people who are wanting to go, so one of the ways you can do it is a Facebook group called Bears of Brooks Falls, and you can hook up with other people who might want to have a place to stay to be able to share that cost. Now, there are meals that are there. The meals are kind of pricey. So for breakfast, it's all buffet style. For breakfast, it's $12 to $17. For kids, $12, $17 for an adult to have breakfast there. For lunch, it is $15 to $24 to be able, $15 for kids, and $24 for adults to be able to eat lunch there, buffet style. And for dinner, the prices are $23 for kids and $40 for adults for dinner. Now, a quick hack is when you stay there for half price at the lunch and dinners, you can get the soup and salad and dessert and bread for half price. That's what we did. We had one meal every day. We had dinners every day, and we ate a lot of soup, salad, and dessert and bread. And that was plenty for $20, and that made really good sense for us. That is not advertised on the website, so that's something that's a good hack for you to know, that if that seems like a god-awful amount of money, $40 for dinner, or for the lunches, that was a lot of money too, that at half the price, you can get a decent meal and get full. It's really nice when you're camping to have a warm meal and to be able to stay inside someplace where it's warm. The fireplace there, we love just sitting around the fireplace and talking to people and hearing their stories too. So that's something we really recommend.
The best thing is that there are lots of outlets here that people use to charge their stuff. We charged here every day and every night.
Also inside the lodge is an alcohol bar where you can get drinks if you want. We didn't do that, but it is a really good option. All right, let's talk about the campground. That's where we stayed. So the campground is much more reasonable, as opposed to the $901 you'll spend to stay in the lodge. The campground, while the lodge is open, the campground is $12 a night. That means that you will have, while the lodge is open, the electric fence that will help keep the bears out. Now, what they say over and over is this electric fence will only keep all but the most determined bears out of the campground. So it's not guaranteeing there won't be bears in the campground, but there's less likely to be bears in the campground. There were no bears in the campground while we were there. So You can stay in the campground from May to October, but I recommend staying in the campground only when the lodge is open. It is a 0.3-mile hike from the campground over to the lodge. And then once you're at the lodge, it is a 1.2-mile hike all the way up to the platform where you can get to Brooks Falls. Now, there are other platforms along the way, but the ones that's the iconic one is the 1.2-mile hike from the lodge. So the things you need to know that when you stay in the campground is that you are not supposed to keep any food in your tent. You're not supposed to have any food on you the entire time you're there. The only time you're allowed to have food is taking it to and from the food cache, which is a building that has, so there are buildings for food, there are buildings for gear, and there are bathrooms, and none of those have electricity. So make sure you have a headlight so that when you get in those rooms are dark. So you need to have a headlight to be able to see your way in there. All your food needs to stay in the food cache. Again, it's like a hut with a door that closes. And then any gear, they recommend not leaving any gear in your tent because bears are really curious. So if you have interesting stuff in your tent, they might be going, oh, what's all that interesting stuff? I want to see it. So put all that gear in the gear cache. So that, again, that's a room that you close the door with no electricity in there. Okay, so here is what the bathrooms look like at Brooks Camp. There are no lights, and they're just a non-flushable toilet. But it works. Make sure you bring a flashlight. They also have food caches and gear caches. You're not allowed to take any food with you anywhere except for to the covered areas to eat. Otherwise, all food should be in the food cache. You can't take anything with you but water. No gum, no candy, no snacks, no nothing. This is what they look like. This is the food cache. Now, this one is fairly empty. Most of them are pretty full. So you've just got shelves to put your stuff. And this is the gear cache. See, the gear cache is fuller of stuff. In fact, where we were staying at the campground, it was slam-packed full of stuff. The bathrooms have no electricity. It's not a flush toilet. It's a sit on the toilet and stand up and walk out toilet. So no electricity in there, so you're not going to be able to dry your hair. There are no showers in the campground. However, a good hack is there is a at the lodge, there is a bathroom there that has electricity and it has showers. You have to pay for the showers with tokens, but you can get a hot shower there right behind the lodge. It's a great hack to know. Here are the bathrooms that are for the lodge. A lot nicer. You can get a token and take a shower. Tokens right now are $7. And the toilets are dun-da-da, flush toilets. Woohoo! The best campsites. So we were wondering, what are the best campsites? Well, for us, the best campsite was right by the bathrooms and the gear caches and the cache for the food. Other people think the best campground site is where you're further from all that. What we found while we were there is that people were really respectful in the campground and really quiet. I can't speak for all times of the year, but for a while we were there. So we were fine right by the bathrooms and the gear caches. One recommendation that we heard from other people and we saw while we were there is that it rains almost every day while you're there. So it might be good to have a tarp to go over your tent. We had a big Agnes tent and we never got wet inside our tent, but a lot of people got wet inside their tent. So if you have a tarp over your tent, then that will help make sure you stay dry. Okay, so what do you do? Well, like we said, we ended up going on cancellations, last minute cancellations. So what do you do? We ended up having we wanted to go 3 days. We had our flight books for 3 days, but we only had 2 days of camping reserved with 2 weeks notice. Well, we kept checking the website, obsessively, until right before the trip is when that last day came open. And that's when most of the cancellations show up, right before the trip. So you're kind of gambling that your spots are going to come open, but they probably will. So what would have happened if our last day we didn't get a spot? Well, if you don't have a spot in Brooks Campground and you're staying overnight, then they make you do backcountry camping. So what that means is you have to get 1.5 miles from Brooks Falls and away from the waterway. So they would tell you where you have to go, but you have to go where you are totally unsupported to be able to camp. Now, for some people that might sound like, okay, that sounded terrifying to me, to be where there are the highest concentration of brown bear in the world, and we're camping without support. But that didn't happen for us. But you should know that is a possibility of what might happen. Let's talk about the rules of what they say you have to do and how strict they are. I thought when you get there, you have to go to bear school and learn all the rules.
Welcome to Brooks Camp in Katmai National Park and Preserve.
And the rules are basically this. You have to keep at least 50 yards between you and a bear at any given time. This is a really good rule. You have to give the bears right away. So if you're walking on a road, this never happened to us, but it happened to lots of people. If you're walking on a trail or a road and a bear is coming behind you or in front of you, you have to get off the trail as much as possible. But you want to get off the trail where you can still see the bear because you want to know when it's clear to come back out and to watch their behavior. The other thing you have to do is do not run. If you run, the bear will think this is going to be great fun. Their predatory response kicks in and they will come after you. So the last thing you want to do is run. You can back away slowly, but don't run. And if you back away slowly, you want to be facing them. You want to make sure you hike in groups if you can, that you want to have other people around you. And when you walk, you need to make lots of noise. So for me, that meant I was singing little songs to the bears. I aggravated my boyfriend with this, but that's how I did it. I sang little songs to the bears as we walked along. And with this method and with my bad singing, we never ran into a bear on the trail. Hello, bear. We love you. We don't want to surprise you. So that is a good rule to follow too. You want to make sure that you leave all your gear in the gear cache and never leave any gear unattended, because bears think any gear is a toy for them and they would love to play with them. And the bears are everywhere. So you think you're leaving it for a second, they will be right there in a minute. And I mean, they are everywhere. So leave your gear in the gear cache and don't leave it unattended. All food has to be stored in the gear cache, and there are particular areas where you can eat your food, and then you're supposed to clean up meticulously afterwards. So this is a rule that they are serious about. The only drinks that you can carry around with you is water, and you're not even allowed to be chewing gum as you walk along, because that's an interesting scent and an interesting smell to the bears. So you can't even chew gum as you walk along. One of the hacks that I recommend is there are 2 gear caches for campers. There's a gear cache in the campground, but there's a gear cache near the lodge. And so a food cache near the lodge. So if you have gear or food that you want to have access to during the day. So for example, when we went to Brooks Falls, we had to come back for lunch because you couldn't take any food with you. So we were not eating at the lodge. So we went all the way back to the campground to get our food out of the food cache to eat. We didn't really need to do that. We could have brought our food to the food cache right by the lodge, so we wouldn't have to walk all the way back to the campground to be able to then go all the way back to the falls to be able to continue shooting in the afternoon. So that's a great hack. And I will say that with the rangers there, so during the season when the lodge is open and the rangers are there, the rangers really took care of the bears for you. If there was a bear sleeping on the trail, they didn't let anybody go through until the bears moved. If there was a bear too close to the lodge, then they were taking care of the bear so it got out of the way. I felt, even though when we arrived there were 3 bears on the beach and we had to delay our getting off the plane.
Welcome to Brooks. A little bit of a delay there with the bears, but we got it figured out.
When we were going to the ranger station to be able to get to bear school, there was a bear walking in the woods right to our left. I felt relatively safe while I was at Brooks Camp. This is an important thing to know because I was terrified going, well, nobody has died this year. In fact, at the campground, or the lodge, there's never been anybody die there. There have been people who doing backcountry camping who were not doing any of the recommended things, that 2 people who had died, but those are well documented. You're going to be, if you follow the rules, you're going to be relatively safe at Brooks Camp. I would not have kids running around there, but if you follow the rules, you're going to feel safe while you're there, which made me really happy to know that I felt okay there. And if I would go back if I did not, if considering the safety concerns of it, there was no problems. I think other things you need to know are basic things about the photography. You're going to enjoy the photography more if you know more about the bears. So every year, the National Park Service puts out a thing about the bears of Brooks Camps. So go ahead and look at that and get to know the frequently seen bears so that you can know them. The other thing I highly recommend is start watching that webcam. There's a webcam that's at Brook Falls, at Riffle Falls, and at the lower platform, and there are chats. There are people on the chats who know so much about the bears, even when there's not one that's one of the ones with the park rangers talking. And they know who all those bears are. And you can start learning the personalities of the bears and where they like to fish and what they like to do. And it makes it so much more fun to know, oh my gosh, that's 747. Oh my gosh, look at Otis in the office. This makes it so much fun to be there when you know who the bears are. So I highly recommend that. The things that you want to know in terms of actually photography is it's more likely to be crowded from 10 o'clock to 4 p.m. That's one of the reasons it's good to stay at Brooks Camps, because you can go to the platforms before 10 and after 4 and really not have that many people at the platforms. When we were there in September, we never had to go on a wait list. We were always able to go right up to the falls and shoot. Now, sometimes the platforms were full, but we were always able to squeeze in. And by waiting for a little bit, we were always able to get to the lower of the 2 platforms to be able to get closer to the bears to shoot. So that is what I would say is a positive for going in September. There were fewer fish jumping and fewer bears out on the platform, out on the falls. But I would highly recommend September. I thought it was a fantastic time to go. Now, one of the things you need to know is that early in the morning, the way the sun comes up, you are shooting toward the sun. So it's not as good a photography as later in the day. We had problems with foggy lenses while we were there. You need to make sure you take something that's going to cover your lens and your camera, because it's probably going to rain. We continued to shoot, and other people did too, with rain hoods on their cameras. But then you have problems with foggy lenses. I heard a lot of people, both Guy and I, had trouble with foggy lenses. So keep an eye on your lens to see if it's fogging up, because those shots that you just took might not be all that great if they're all foggy. I think the other thing I would say is I would recommend a minimum of a 3-day stay. I hear horror stories of people who go for the day and their water taxi got canceled, and if there are people that the weather is bad and they're going to only make 1 or 2 flights, they're going to prioritize those flights for people who are staying at the lodge or people who are staying longer as opposed to the day trippers. So if you stay there, you're going to be at more of a priority to get to the lodge or the campground. And you're less likely, if there's travel problems such as the weather, to have your whole trip get canceled out. In terms of bugs, we went in September and we did not have any trouble with the bugs. I hear earlier in the season that you need to wear long sleeve clothes and things that cover up your hands and bug spray and netting over your head. We had none of that problem in September. And we also, with a 3-day stay, were able to do the 10,000 Smokes tour. I really recommend that trip. I thought it was a good way to break up. I know that you're there for the bears, but that was a great trip. I would recommend it. It is something that I would recommend booking up before you leave to go there, because by the time you get there, it can be all the way sold out. And I recommend doing it earlier in your trip than later, because if it rains, that trip can get canceled, and that way you will have another chance to rebook later. Now, the other trip that we did was we got a Brooks River Corridor Pass. Now, the Brooks River Corridor Pass allows you to leave the area where all the photographers are, and it allows you to go out to the river river itself, within 50 yards from the water's edge on either side of the banks. And there are paths that can take you out to do that. You just need to know that this costs $6. It's actually free, but the booking fee is $6. And that lasts for 7 days and allows you to have more access to the river. Of course, that meant you had to be more brave because you were not in the protected platforms where you shoot otherwise. And it also means that you need to make sure that you're at least 100 yards from any other groups and at least 50 yards from any bears. Now, I had some people say when I was reading reviews of this, that it was hard to follow those rules and be anywhere because there was bears everywhere and there were other groups. For us, what it meant is that we had access to areas that other people didn't. We went along the road further down from the lower platform where it was nice and open. We never got brave enough to go by the Riffles platform. There's a path that goes that way. We were chicken. But when we talked to the rangers, they said one of the things you can do is befriend the fishermen. There are a lot of fishermen there who are there with waders on and they go out. And that if you don't feel comfortable, you can traipse along with them because they do that a lot. And if you're in groups, you're safer. The other things that I think that is important to know is that I saw one person in a wheelchair there. The lodge is wheelchair accessible, and so was the bathrooms. So I know that the float plane is not handicap accessible, but I believe that the water taxis are more accommodating. So if you have some mobility issues and need a wheelchair while you're there, there are options to be able to take care of your needs. These are the things that I can think of, having just come back from Brooks Lodge, that I think are important to know. I hope this video was really helpful for you, and I hope you have a fantastic time at Brooks Lodge and Brooks Camp. We had a blast. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.